While the negotiation goes on over teacher assignments in contract language, there's also a possibility voters will have their say in a referendum. The group Stand for Children wants to make it possible for teacher layoffs and promotions to be more closely tied to student performance. And joining us from Stand for Children is the executive director, Jason Williams. Thank you very much for being with us.
Chris, good to see you.
If this gets cleared to go, what exactly would happen if people approved it?
Yeah. So last year, we worked in partnership with the commissioner, the state board, labor, other organizations to pass new educator evaluation guidelines and regulations. And we said that, evidence of student learning, as you referenced in the intro, should be part of that answer to what you should evaluate teachers on. However, it doesn't create the linkage between the quality of the work that people are doing in the classroom and the key staffing decisions around who's in the classroom, who's running the schools. And so what we're trying to do through the initiative is create that linkage to say those key staffing decisions in our schools should be driven by a person's work instead of just how long they've been in the school system.
Get me into a little more detail about how you evaluate the teachers, because I guess those are the bricks in the wall here, right?
So that's the work that was laid last year with the new regulations to set up this model system. Over the next 3 years, they're actually going to be phasing in that system. This year it's starting with level 4 schools, next year with Race to the Top school districts. The following year it'll actually be all school districts. During that time they're actually developing what the exemplars are going to be around all of the different assessments that you can use. Because one of the big things that we and all other groups advocated for was to say, let's not just simply use MCAS, for example. Let's use multiple measures, let's look at student growth. And that's the work that's being done because we know there's a lot of great examples of assessments out there in our local schools and districts. Let's collect all of that information, let's put it together so that 3 years from now when that's rolled out with all the school districts, we have that all compiled, it's good to go. Our hope is that starting at that point, you can now phase in the linkage part of saying, okay, we've got this evaluation system in place that we've all agreed to, we're all excited about. Now let's start making sure that that's guiding the decisions around, again, who's teaching our children and running our schools.
How easy is it to evaluate? Because you have even just one student, you look at one set of scores, but there could be multiple teachers who are responsible for that.
So I think, what they do there is, again, I'll use my own example. I started my career as a middle school math and science teacher. My kids were going to other teachers for reading, for history, for physical education, etc. Is looking at, okay, the subject area that you're teaching the child, what's the actual content knowledge that they're supposed to possess that particular year. Let's assess what they actually know when they walk into your classroom. And then let's look at how much growth has taken place over the course of the year. And that's the reason why the student growth was a really important aspect of the new evaluation system, because we don't want to penalize teachers that are going to go into environments where they're going to have a more difficult challenge because kids are further behind, of saying, well, you got to get every single child that year up to grade level. Well, if they're starting 4 or 5 grade levels behind, that's probably unrealistic. In 1 year's time they're going to get every single child up. But if they can get those children to grow 2 or 3 years in that 1 year, and you keep replicating that year after year, it's going to start closing and eliminating that achievement gap.
Well, no matter how much people like the idea here, it is going to be a change in what's currently out there in teacher contracts. That sounds like it could be a legal problem.
So the interesting thing, it is a legal challenge in the sense that what we're asking for is a statewide rule that says, regardless of the school district, that we're going to base, again, teacher placement decisions around merit instead of just simply around seniority. The interesting thing is, though, our organization, Stand for Children, we did a study last year where we pulled all 310 collective bargaining agreements that are available publicly, and we analyzed those, and we said, well, what do they say about these rules that we're asking to be universal across the state for all kids? And interestingly enough, it showed that in the majority of our high-income suburban school districts, you can actually look at teacher performance when making these decisions. But in the almost 3/4 of our low-income urban school districts, you can only look at seniority. And to us, that's just not a logical way to be looking at this, because if we want people to be going into environments where they're going to need to work even harder because our kids are further behind, then at the end of the day, we want to make sure that their work actually counts, it actually matters. And the contracts are out of sync with that in those environments.
Now, I'm also reading between the lines here, there's some politics around this, and one of the teacher unions in Massachusetts saying, look, even the governor's administration doesn't like this referendum very much either.
I think the biggest concern that we've heard is the timing argument. And in referencing the governor's administration, that's been a concern that's been raised, is the timing, is to say, well, let's give the new evaluation regs time to breathe. And what we've said is, again, referencing your previous question on looking at collective bargaining agreements, we said, well, when are those going to expire? When do they get renewed? If we were to pass our law now, you'd be looking at almost 40% of school districts having 6 years from today before they'd actually have to create that linkage, which would be 3 years after the new evaluations have gone through. If we were to wait, let's say, another 3 to 4 years to even start the legislative process, then in some cases for school districts, you'd be looking at almost a 9 to 12-year window before the reforms are put in place. That's literally a generation of children going through the school system. And as an advocacy group that's focused on kids, we felt that that wasn't a reasonable timeline.
Another development you've been following is a decision recently in Washington to ease up on some of the No Child Left Behind requirements. I know many school systems around the country are having trouble meeting the original goal, but some other people are worried that, hey, if you give up on this, does that mean it's a joke?
Yeah, well, we actually supported the waiver for Massachusetts, because when you looked at the way No Child Left Behind was being implemented and the way in which we were measuring student success and progress, we felt it was out of skew with just accepting and understanding the reality of the challenges in all of our school environments and making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success, that over time we can actually be closing the achievement gap. And so we're thrilled that through the waiver process, it's actually saying we're going to still hold firm on accountability, but we're going to do it in a smart way. We're going to say, let's look at student growth. Let's look at multiple measures to determine if our children are moving forward, instead of what you saw under No Child Left Behind, primarily just ends-based analysis we call in education, where you only look at where the kid finishes at the end of the year. You're only perhaps looking at a standardized test. Let's make this a much more meaningful and fruitful process.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Chris.
From Stand for Children, Jason Williams.